Panasonic has a history of delaying their projects. The GH6 was supposed to be released before the end of 2021, as promised by Panasonic, later posting this apology. The eagerly awaited successor to the breakthrough Panasonic Lumix GH5 Mark II will not meet the 2021 release window that was announced during the camera's unveiling in May. The Panasonic S1 and the S1H successor were supposed to be announced mid-2023, but that date came and went, as did others. With the S1R Mark II in doubt for 2024, what about the S1H Mark II? Details coming up, but before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. In late 2023, and a couple of times here in early 2024, I said that if Panasonic doesn't release a successor to the S1 or S1R and the S1H before the end of this year, well, they're going to start bleeding customers to Sony, Canon, and Nikon, because those companies, well, they're certainly not making their customers wait nearly as long for flagship models like the S1 and the S1H. And if we go back in time, the Panasonic S1 was announced in September of 2020, except that it wasn't. And it wasn't even announced in September of 2019. It was announced all the way back in September 2018. And it was part of Panasonic's first venture into full-frame mirrorless cameras, but it didn't ship until March of the next year. And if we do the math, and yes, we're going back pretty far, in just a few days, we're going to reach the 6-year mark. That's right, 6 years since Panasonic announced the S1. 6 long years. And in those 6 years, Canon released not just one, but 2 R5 cameras. Nikon released the Z8 and the Z9, and Sony managed to release 2 A7R cameras, the A7R4 and the A7R5, with rumors of the A7R6 to come sometime in 2025. And just think about that for a minute. We've had 2 R5s and 2 A7R5s. What if, and I think this is you let me know if you think this is a real possibility or not. Could we get another Sony A7R camera, an A7R6 before Panasonic starts shipping a successor to the S1 and the S1R or the S1H? Oh boy. Just imagine how many Canon customers were upset that the R5 Mark II was taking so long, and that camera is normally refreshed every 3 to 4 years. Not 5, definitely not 6. However, I do have some good news. I heard from a source just recently, just yesterday morning. I didn't have a chance to do a video because I had to, work got in the way, but there's good and bad news. So the good news is, before the end of this year, and that's probably going to be sometime from the middle of September to the end of October, Panasonic is going to announce the S1H Mark II. Now, the source didn't give me an exact date. I would expect the mid-September to the end of October. They could do something in November. We've seen Canon do the early days of November, but December is right out. And this would be a big deal. Now, that it probably wouldn't ship until sometime in January if that's the case. Now for the bad news. And you recall that the S1H Mark II was released a few months, or announced a few months after the S1 and the S1R. The S1 Mark II, that's not happening this year. We're going to have to wait until next year, which puts us at about 6.5 years. And if it comes in the fall, that would be a staggering 7 years before the refresh. So what about the specifications for either of these cameras? Well, my source didn't tell me any. I was lucky to get this information. So I went circulating, looking on the web and looking at all the usual sources. Now, Andrea Pizzini actually beat me by a few days. I didn't realize he'd already put out a piece on this. And sadly, and again, when he's talking from reliable sources, his guys are he's usually bang on. He's usually very, very accurate. He also didn't have any specifications. He started speculating based on some wild rumors, and I didn't want to go down that road because I don't think it serves us any purpose. And because we've waited 6 long years at this point, it's kind of hard to predict where they could be. We can look at the Canon EOS R5, we can look at the Nikon Z8, we can look at the Sony A7R5, the A7 IV to get an idea of where it should produce a camera. But we don't. Now, we do have some executives from Panasonic that have given us a few quotes. So we do know the upper ceiling of this camera. Tamaka-san said that the demand for 8K is simply not enough to justify an update. So if you're wondering what exactly does that mean, that there's some wiggle room, which camera are they referring to? Is this cinema? Is this part of their Lumix line for digital stills hybrid cameras? Well, the interviewer wasn't exactly satisfied with the answer either, so he pushed a little bit further and got this answer. The current popularity of 8K in the consumer market just isn't enough. It will be released later. And that quote came out in September of 2023, a whole year ago. Sadly, I think Panasonic is going to stick to around 24 megapixels. I think it's playing it safe. That'll give us 6K oversampled 4K for what is essentially a largely video-centric camera. I don't think they're going to do 8K. Now, if they do 8K, well, I guess we can add that to a long list of things that I didn't see coming, like my receding hairline. But all joking aside, it has been 6 years since Panasonic released an update to the S1 line, the S1, the S1R, or even the S1H. And just to put things into perspective, in 2018, when Panasonic made the announcement of the S1 and the S1R, Canon didn't even have a full-frame mirrorless camera yet. They did announce the EOS R later in October, but no Canon camera on the market at that point offered a full-frame mirrorless camera, with IBIS, uncropped, delivering log profiles, waveforms, histograms, false colors, along with feature enhancements in regular firmware updates. And that's what hurts most of all if you're a Panasonic customer. Not only waiting 6 years, but seeing all the advantages, well, evaporate, seeing the competition catch up. Regular firmware updates? Check. Regular firmware updates that provide enhancement, not just bug fixes? Check. Video tools such as waveforms, vector scopes, false colors, and histograms that stay on the screen when you press record? Check. Incredible video resolutions and refresh rates? Check. IBIS? Check. I get the frustration. I get where you're coming from. It used to be that when Panasonic's camera division woke up in the morning, they would simply piss excellence. But today, I get a sense that they're acting like old men, waking up 2 to 3 times in the middle of the night and delivering nothing. I get it. I get your frustration waiting 3 long years. I get your frustration. I really do. Waiting 6 long years and not a hint of anything? I don't believe this is a technical problem. I believe it's a prioritization or funding problem within Panasonic themselves, the head organization. Perhaps Panasonic as an organization is really in trouble. Perhaps there aren't enough funds to complete projects on time, dragging them out for years. You're not going to find any customer base waiting 6 long years without bleeding some customers. I mean, that's just how it is. All you have to do is look at your friends and see what they're shooting with. How many of them are willing to wait 6 long years to see the company do anything? It certainly creates frustration. It creates disappointment. And to some degree, it creates worries about where the future is for the platform. Nobody wants to be investing in a platform that doesn't look like it's going anywhere, that doesn't have a vision. I'm not saying Panasonic doesn't, but based on what we've seen from Bloomberg and other financial press, and based on what the CEO has said about a crisis, a looming crisis, there is concern within the organization. I really do hope that we do, based on what my source is hearing and based on what we're hearing by Andrea Pizzini, that something is coming this fall, in September or in October. Are you a Panasonic loyal customer? Did you used to paint with Panasonic? Did you used to shoot with Panasonic? What do you shoot with now, and have you actually left Panasonic, and what have you left Panasonic for? Have you picked up a Canon EOS R5 or R5 Mark II? Or what about the Nikon Z8 or Z9? Or even, on the Sony side, the FX3? Or maybe the FX3 30, yeah, the APS-C version, and then of course it could be the A7 IV, or maybe you might have gone up to something bold like the Alpha 1, although that's in a completely different market segment than we would expect to see the S1, the S1H, and the and the S1R. I was really excited when I saw Panasonic announce the S5 Mark II with a phase detect autofocus system. They really grabbed a lot of momentum, and I was expecting the S1 or the S1R, maybe the S1H, to be announced a few months later. Remember, that announcement came in January of last year. To announce the S1, the S1R, and the S1H in May? Or let's say the S1, the S1R, or let's combine those two cameras together, announce that in May, and then in the fall, the S1H Mark II. That didn't happen. That was a lot of missed opportunity, and that to me didn't make a lot of sense. Not when the competition had really stepped up, and stepped up they had. I mean, Canon since 2018 had released the R5 and the R5 Mark II, Nikon the Z8 and the Z9, Sony the A7R4, the A7R5, with talks about the A7R6. And I always like to finish off the video by taking a look at deals of the week, and even when I looked at deals of the week, I didn't find anything reassuring. Now, the price of the S1, well, that does look rather attractive at $19.99, but it's special order. And the S1H, still at $39.97, is also special order. The Nikon Z8 has been on sale for many months, $200 off. The R5 Mark I, on sale $400, and that's actually a drop of around $900 from its release price. Or what about the Sony FX3? I don't mean to be harsh. I don't mean to be disrespectful. But part of this message is to Panasonic. 6 years is unacceptable. 7 years is right out. I mean, even 5 years is pushing it. I know Sony did it with the A7S III. We had to wait 5 years for that camera. But it was a very different world. Canon and Nikon were still sleeping. They weren't producing impressive cameras like they have since 2020 and 2021. The competition is on fire, and Panasonic, it feels like you're just out there grazing in the fields, looking at the sun and the trees, and I get a sense that things aren't going so well and that you're dealing with some internal prioritization issues and maybe funding issues, but if you want to stay in this game, you got to produce cameras, and at the very latest, 5 years is the longest anybody should wait, and if they're going to wait that long, you got to release some sort of game-changing camera, because if you just come out with 24 megapixels and a few other things that we saw in the S1 and the S1R, and it's not up there with the Z8, the R5, or the A7R5, then you're going to have a lot of frustrated customers that might just go to Sony that has a huge inventory of lenses with their E-mount, or cameras that can do 8K up to 60 frames per second. And with Canon, not only did they release the R5 Mark II, but they also released a cinema version that can record unlimited in any condition. S1H Mark II, can you at least catch up to the 2-year-old Canon EOS R5C? Right on the eve of Canon getting ready to announce the R5C Mark II. And I'm sorry, folks, if I'm a little bit too down on Panasonic, but it's more to do with frustration, and I'm trying to send a message to Panasonic that this long wait isn't acceptable. I think what they did with the S5 Mark II is terrific. The S5 Mark II X as well. I want to see more of that. Waiting as long as we have, it doesn't fly. Anyhows, thank you. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. It's very much appreciated. One thing about those links and all the affiliate links in the description down below, if you do use those, I could get a commission back, a small feedback. It doesn't cost you anything extra. You'll pay the same as if you went to the sites directly, but it's one way that you can get a really great deal and help support this channel. And as far as Canon and Nikon, there are a huge amount of sales all the way from the R50 and the Z50, Z30, all the way up to the top of the line, with the exception of the Z6 Mark III and the R5 Mark II, for obvious reasons. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.